Tourists thought they saw sheep while traveling over the Arctic Ocean, but in fact they saw something else. If this hadn't been filmed, no one would have believed it. "We've spotted something unusual ahead," shouted one of the passengers, pointing toward the shore. Heads turned in unison, eyes straining against the pale horizon. Small white dots peppered the coastline, scattering across the rocky terrain like snowflakes on a barren landscape. Dr. Emma Frost gripped the railing of the MV Academic Shikulski, her heart racing. After a lifetime of studying bears, could this finally be her moment? "Must be a flock of sheep," someone muttered, the words half swallowed by the wind that whipped across the deck of the ship. Emma's hopes plummeted. Of course it wasn't polar bears, it never was. From a distance, the white forms scattered along the rocky shore looked like nothing more than grazing animals lazily milling about in the cold Arctic air. But as the ship inched closer, cutting through the choppy waves with a steady rhythm, the true nature of the gathering became horrifyingly clear. These weren't sheep. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell for more amazing stories. They weren't grazing, and what they were doing would be seared into the minds of the onlookers forever, a memory that would haunt their dreams and change their understanding of the natural world. While everyone was busy watching the scene, Emma's mind raced back to where her journey had begun 20 years earlier. At 18, Emma had been the youngest volunteer at the Arctic Research Station in Svalbard, wide-eyed and bursting with enthusiasm. She'd arrived expecting to see polar bears roaming the snowy landscape. Instead, she found herself scrubbing floors and organizing data sheets. "You have to earn your stripes here, kid," Dr. Johansson, the grizzled lead researcher, had told her. "Polar bears don't just show up on command." Undeterred, Emma threw herself into her work. She devoured every piece of polar bear research she could find, staying up late into the Arctic nights illuminated by the midnight sun. Weeks turned into months, summer faded into the long polar nights, still no bears. "Maybe next season," the other researchers would say, patting her shoulders sympathetically. But next season came and went, and the one after that. Emma completed her undergraduate degree, then her PhD, all focused on polar bear behavior and conservation. She analyzed countless tracks in the snow, examined fur samples, and pored over satellite imagery. She became Dr. Emma Frost, respected polar bear expert with published papers and speaking engagements at prestigious conferences, all without ever seeing a live polar bear in the wild. Her colleagues started calling her ghost chaser behind her back. Emma pretended not to hear, but each whisper felt like a needle in her heart. Year after year, she returned to the Arctic, chasing rumors of sightings and following migration patterns. Antarctica, Greenland, northern Canada, she visited them all, always a step behind, always too late. Now at 38, Emma found herself on this expedition to Wrangel Island, her last hope. If she didn't see a polar bear here, in one of their last strongholds, she would have to face the possibility that her life's work had been in vain. The ship's horn blasted, jolting Emma back to the present. She blinked, refocusing on the shoreline ahead. The white dots were larger now, taking shape as the ship approached. The excitement on deck was palpable. Cameras were ready and binoculars were pressed against eager eyes. The passengers had been briefed on the wildlife. They might encounter Arctic foxes, muskoxen, and if they were very lucky, maybe a glimpse of a polar bear or two. But what lay ahead defied all expectations. Emma's hands trembled as she raised her binoculars. The world narrowed to the circular view in her lenses. She adjusted the focus and suddenly everything became crystal clear. Her breath caught in her throat. The binoculars slipped from her grasp, clattering to the deck. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind and waves. It soon became evident to every passenger on deck that there was no flock of sheep. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and a wave of disbelief and awe swept across the deck. Cameras clicked in rapid succession, recording every moment of this unprecedented sight. The white dots weren't sheep at all, they were polar bears. Hundreds of them. The shocking scene unfolding before the ship's passengers sent shivers down their spines, a stark reminder of the untamed wilderness of this remote place. The Arctic, often viewed as a pristine, untouched wilderness, was revealing its harsh realities in a way that none of them had expected. As the passengers watched in awe at the raw power of nature, their shock slowly turned into a deep sense of humility. They realized they were just visitors in this vast, harsh world where survival was ruled by ice and wind. It was especially true of their destination, Wrangel Island, a remote outpost that had survived the test of time in the harshest elements of the Arctic. The sight of so many polar bears was so unbelievable, so beyond comprehension, that even the guides, veterans of many Arctic expeditions, were stunned into silence. At least 230 polar bears crowded the shoreline, a seething, shifting mass of creamy white fur and black noses. The beach, normally a desolate stretch of rock and ice, had been transformed into a living carpet of bears. Mothers huddled protectively over cubs, their watchful eyes never leaving the approaching ship. Massive solitary males prowled among them, their scarred muzzles and powerful shoulders a testament to the harsh life they led. Some bears stood on their hind legs, peering out at the ship as if they were the ones watching the humans, curious about these strange intruders in their domain. "What on earth?" Emma whispered, breaking the tense silence that had fallen over the ship. The words seemed to hang in the air, giving voice to the collective shock and confusion of everyone on board. Emma's mind reeled. This was impossible. Polar bears were solitary creatures. They didn't gather in groups, let alone in numbers like this. Yet here they were, defying everything she thought she knew.